Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for everyone who's joining us in the room today and listening out on the Hangout on record. We've got some new people in the room today. We're testing out a new time for our Hangout today, just a one-off, and we'll see if it works for different people. So we've got Carrie over in the US. I think I've just seen somebody else pop up there. Cindy as well, Kim, who's been on several of our Hangouts before, and Roz and Susie and myself. I seem to be logged into this as somebody completely different, so I don't have something telling you who I am, because it doesn't seem to want to work. But anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirsty Gray, and I was the original chair and now secretary of the society. And today we're going to be talking about how to start your one place study from scratch, which we've all done once upon a time. Some of us probably actively thought about how we were going to start it, and some of us probably kind of went, I'm already doing it. And it's all kind of a little bit too late now for the original plan. So I thought I'd sort of start us off with a little bit of a history of kind of where I've come from, because I am just starting a new one place study because I have so much time on my hands. It's a bit of a crazy reason for why I'm starting a new one, but which I'll explain as well. But I'm hoping it will bring up a couple of discussion points that people in the room can kind of pitch in on, and maybe some people can put some comments in Facebook or in the Google Plus community as well. So I'll kind of start off with a little bit of a slideshow, but not too much, so you won't see me for a minute and you'll just hear my dulcet tones instead, hopefully, if everything works okay. So right, let me just screen share. This is always the master plan of making sure that everything works, and then we'll start ourselves off. So hopefully you can see my starting a one place study from scratch slide. Of course I can only see one thing, otherwise I can't actually move the slides. So so as I say, I've done a couple of one place studies for a while, and as a society we defined a one place study as considering the people and families in their physical and social context in any location across the globe. That was when we founded the Society for One Place Studies back in 2013. And I've been doing two one place studies for quite a while now. Didn't actively decide I was going to do one place studies, but actively fell into a hole and realised I was. One of mine was because I do a surname study on the name of Silliphant. I'm hoping that you can see the slide there that's got my Richard Silliphant Mason. And this plaque was on the side of a tower of a very, very, very small church, which is now a redundant church on the borders of Devon and Cornwall in a little village called Luffincott, which has very, very few people in it now. And in fact, even over the centuries, hasn't ever had really more than 100 residents in it, ever. It's got a big Barton at the end of, I wouldn't even call it a main road, but at the end of the road, and then the church is right next door to it. And on the side of the church, there was this plaque, and I went there looking for my Silliphant name bearers, not because I was particularly interested in the place. It's a tiny, tiny village, and the roads are so narrow. You go down them and they're the classic roads that just have the lump in the middle of the road of grass still that the tractors haven't worn away. There's lots of those in Devon and Cornwall. But it's a really idyllic church that isn't used. It's got about 25 graves in the actual churchyard, of course, all of which I've now photographed and transcribed and so on. And the church isn't used as a church. It's actually one of the redundant churches, and it's looked after by the St Andrew in the Wardrobe, I think it's called. So that's one of my older places that I do. And this is the church that you can just about see from Luffincott, which is Tetcott, which is the next door parish. And the reason why I do both of these is because my Silliphant surname name bearers, they often trot through, I think. I like to call it trotting through, generally on horses, through Tetcott and Luffincott. So there are quite a few in the records. And actually the boundaries of the two places change. So in one census you might find that one property is considered as Luffincott, and in the next one it will have gone back to Tetcott, and in the one after that it might have gone back again. So I found it much easier to collect all the information about both parishes to try and really build up a picture of what they were like over time. And then came Porcupine. Now, Porcupine is a place. It's not, well, it is an animal, obviously, but it is actually a place as well. And I write blogs about random things, and once upon a time, about a year ago, I looked for all sorts of animals. And I looked up the word porcupine in, I think it was the 1911 census. And I was staggered to find that people were born in a place called Porcupine. So, slightly obsessed that I am, I decided to start looking into all of these people and the place that is Porcupine. It's a really obvious reason to start doing a one-place study, isn't it? Maybe not. So the first steps I thought about was kind of, why am I interested? It's a bit of a random. Why am I interested? Well, because it's an odd place. Where did the name come from? Was it a small place, a big place? Has it grown over time? Has it shrunk over time? What did I want to find out? Well, I wanted to find out where the name had come from. And actually, that's a simpler job than I thought. How much time can I devote to the project? Well, really, not a lot, if I'm honest. So it's not something that I can actually actively say, I've got X number of hours per week. I dip my toes into the water when I can, and obviously not when I don't have the time. And what do I already know? Well, to be frank, nothing. I knew nothing about Porcupine at all. But these are the kind of classic questions that anyone can think about when they're starting out a one-place study. So if you're thinking about why are you interested, well, what do you want to know? It might be that you want to know more about the people. You might want to focus on that. You might think, well, actually, I'm quite interested in the buildings, and maybe there's been quite a lot of building over time, so the community's changed quite a lot. You might want to look at the actual buildings and what they're used for. For me, thinking about the studies I've been doing for a while, Tetcott and Luffingcott, Tetcott once had a pub. It doesn't now. Tetcott once had a school. It doesn't now. But those buildings are still there. It once had a shop and a post office. Guess what? It doesn't now. It's a very rural community, and those things are now gone. So how do I start uncovering the story of my new one-place study? I really had to think about the research methods that I wanted to use, especially when I was asked to do a presentation at the conference this year in November about migration in and out of Porcupine, which I knew nothing about. So I had to think about where I was going to collect all that information from to actually create something that was interesting and worth listening to, and something that members could transfer into their own studies. So what are the best lines of inquiry to follow? These are questions you can ask yourself as well. Where are the best places to go to find out what I want to know? And that will be different depending on where your study is, of course. How am I going to gather all the information together about my study? And how am I going to present my discoveries? Well, for me, at the moment, that's quite specific because it is for the conference in November. So I was thinking, right, I really have to go back to the basics here. So I went to Januki, which for people who do any kind of English research, whether it's family history, local history, social history, is a really good basis to find out more about the parishes within the UK and Ireland, whether it's England, Scotland, Wales, Isle of Man, Channel Islands are all included. Anybody know where Porcupine is? I bet you're all sitting there thinking, okay, it's called Porcupine, but where the hell is this place? Well, actually, it's part of a little place, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I've been taught how to pronounce it several times, but I'll probably get it wrong again. Trewardith. The R was in the wrong place, you see. Trewardith, I think, is better. But there's a map there to show you roughly where it is. That obviously cuts halfway across the word anyway. But it's down in Cornwall. It's just down in Cornwall, between Fowey and St Austell, which is sort of, I'd say, two of the bigger places, although Cornwall is not known for large places. But they're the sort of the main places that you might know on the map. If I just overlay that, this is actually where Porcupine is. It's a very small part of Trewardith. I think that's right. And it's grown basically from a very, very small part, i.e. a building. So I found this information all over the place, actually. I hope nobody's copywritten this as their own words, because it's in about 20 different places. But this is actually the reason why Porcupine is called Porcupine. So the Tywardreth Magistrates Court used to meet at the Porcupine Inn. So it used to be just a pub. And the inn received its curious name after one of the magistrates was nicknamed Old Pricklyback. And so the site of the inn is called Porcupine, which I don't think the inn is still there from the small amount of research I've done so far. But the site, which is halfway up Penpillick Hill, which is a lovely name as well, is still called Porcupine. And so some people in the censuses have referred to their birthplace as Porcupine, and there's a bed and breakfast called Porcupine, and I found a couple of different houses that are for sale that refer to their place as Porcupine. So if we go back to the map just there, you can see it's kind of a very small part of what would be the village of Tywardreth. See, it gets better every time I say it. So I went down to Cornwall Record Office about a month ago because I thought, oh gosh, I've got this presentation to do in November, so I better do some work. So I had the opportunity to go down to Cornwall Record Office, and like any other local archive, they have all of these things and more. There aren't actually a huge number of records with relation to parish registers. I've trawled through the whole of Tywardreth, and not one of the baptisms or marriages or burials that I went through had Porcupine written on it. I was so disappointed. I was thinking, oh, at least I could find one or two, but there was nothing, because they're all relating to a street or just saying that their abode is Tywardreth. They're not actually specific to Porcupine at all. And of course, the ones that are closer to current day aren't available to access anyway. I did manage to find some maps and some letters and some deeds, which were quite handy. So I have actually got something about the area. But of course, things like schools, well, there isn't a school in that tiny little part of the village. There's Porcupine Inn and some documents that relate to that. I haven't managed to find any photographs as yet of other properties in Porcupine, as in historic ones. There isn't a workhouse. So because it's so small, actually, although it seems like a good one to do because it's small, there's not very many records to assist in the research and really building up a bigger picture. I've briefly looked at some of the documents that the National Archives hold, and again, things that you'd naturally think, oh yes, you know, there'll be wills for people that said they were of Porcupine. Well, there aren't, because people say that they're of Tywardreth, not Porcupine. So there's not a huge amount of information there either. It's very helpful, though, to have the Discovery Catalogue. You can actually, on the new Discovery Catalogue, on the National Archives site, you can actually say, I only want to see records that are held in particular archive offices. So I know that's probably not hugely big on the screens there, but I've put just the filter for Cornwall Record Office, and there are only 9 records for Porcupine. That's it. That are on the catalogue for Discovery Catalogue. There's more when you look on the Cornwall Record Office site when you actually go down to the office itself. But you can see there's a couple of deeds and leases and things like that, but they're not hugely informative. Some of them are quite old, and they don't actually really tell you about the people that sort of owned property. Well, they tell you about the people that own the properties, but not too much more than that. The Office for National Statistics, I'm sure some people will have used that. Again, the problem that I have, it's not its own parish. It's one tiny little section of Tywardreth, so it's very difficult to find information that's specific to Porcupine. Another good site to use, but as in for this particular study, not particularly helpful. This site is brilliant. It's a new find for me, Historic England, and I've been absolutely amazed at how much is on there for one of my other studies, Luffingcott. But again, Porcupine doesn't feature. So some really good sites that you can find information on, but I seem to be stumbling across a problem here, as you've probably guessed from what I've said, that because it's so small, the amount of information that's available to me is also really, really small. So my 2 studies I have been doing for quite a number of years, I always considered as small studies. Well, not compared to Porcupine, they're not. So I've got to kind of really think about the questions that I'm asking myself. So thinking about those first steps that I was looking at the top there. What do I want to find out? I've already had to hone that very carefully, because actually I may not be able to find what I wanted to find. So it's an interesting problem, and I'll just stop sharing there. But it's a really interesting problem to have, because, as I say, I always thought that the studies I was doing before were small, but actually I'm doing an even smaller one now. And it's opened up my eyes, having done a lot of research over the years on those 2 parishes. How do you start from scratch now, with all the access that we have to things and all the electronic digitized documents and things we have? How do you start from scratch? So hopefully that's brought some questions for people. And is anybody else in a position of having a tiny, tiny, tiny study like me? No. I was hoping somebody would go, yes, and I've got a really good idea for you.
One of mine is quite small.
Right.
I was on most of my focus has been on Debenham. And at the last Hangout with Janet and Kim, where we were talking about migration, Kim made the blindingly obvious statement of, why don't you pick one of your smaller parishes? And I thought, I don't know, why don't I? So I started looking at Aspel,
Right.
which is almost one that I started by accident because it's next door, and Debenham was where they all worked. And
Right.
Aspel has actually only got 37, even today, has only got 37 people living there. So that is really tiny. And so I've now gradually started transcribing the censuses for it, because it has got its own church, so it is a parish.
Right.
So it's relatively easy to search on. So it's obviously better than Porcupine, but again, it's small enough that it's something you can get your teeth into.
And Kirsty, I'd kind of ask you the opposite question. Have you considered studying to Wardress? By the way, I have a feeling something's ringing a bell, Kirsty, that Fowey may not be Fowey. We need to check that out. Fowey.
Oh.
So, yeah, okay. I was going to double check, thank you. But
I don't know.
it's a really interesting part of the country. I have some Eastlake family down there, and any thing in Cornwall gets interesting, but I wonder if you've considered kind of looking to broaden your horizons.
I have briefly thought about it, Kim, and then briefly thrown that stupid idea out the window. I think the thing with it was, the reason for doing it was completely name related. So it's not that I have any connection to it at all. It was completely, call it a flight of fancy if you like. But I just liked the name, and I thought it'd just be interesting to find out more about where the name came from, and a bit more about it. But I don't have any kind of interest really. I'm sure Wardress is a lovely place, but I don't have any interest in that parish as a whole at all, really.
How big is Wardress compared to
I don't know, actually. I did put it into Januki earlier on, and I've still got that open now. It's monumental inscriptions. It says for the parish church there were 1,176 entries. Yeah. So that comment I made about not being interested in the whole thing. Yeah. So it's too big, and it's the reason for my interest was literally because of the name. So I think I'll stick with it and just keep looking for those records in unusual places.
Well, I look forward to your migration pitch, Kirsty.
Yeah. Yeah, people that migrate from the tiniest place in the entirety of Cornwall. Yeah, could be an interesting one. So in terms of size of people's studies then, I mean, I know Susie's one is probably about the same size as my Luffing cot, or maybe a little bit smaller. But I mean, how big are other people's studies? Carrie, where are you studying your one place study?
Well, I live in Texas. I just moved here about a year ago, and I live very close to Austin, which is the state capital. And that's one of my questions was, do I look at Austin? Do I look at Travis County? Do I look at little neighborhoods in Austin? Because it's a pretty big place. But, you know, I'm looking at doing it because I don't know anything about it since I just moved here. That was one of my motivations in doing a one-place study, was just to get me familiar also, but for the benefit of everybody else in Austin. So that's what I'm looking at, and really I'm just looking for guidance. So whatever you guys can
help.
Yeah.
Help, please.
Right.
I live in England, but I lived in San Antonio a long time.
I was gonna say your accent is not English.
I just kind of ended up here, but Austin, I dearly love, but I think I'd be utterly overwhelmed to think about a one-place study. There are some precedents, though. For example, there's a very excellent site on Plymouth, Devon, that I find. Plymouth is very large and grew astoundingly through the 1800s and on. And they it's quite different from the way I approach mine, which is only about 400 or 500 people at any given time. But it's a very interesting one if you want to think about perhaps doing some thematic things, like they've pulled together notable people from Plymouth, the buildings. And so if you do choose to do a very large place, and I think I saw Austin, it's certainly 100,000 more people. It's really big.
And it's growing right now. It's getting huge right now.
I was there in the 80s, and I think I heard it had grown tremendously. But it's just that you just need to think out really hard then.
Right.
Do you want to focus on a time frame? Do you want to focus on a particular aspect of the place?
That's a good idea. Focusing on a time frame. I really like that. Yeah.
And it would also be a great one for famous people because you've got, I think, the state government there. You've got the university. You've got all kinds of really interesting things about the place. But I do think you have to think very carefully, or you could get overwhelmed. But do take a look at that. I have found their Plymouth site extremely interesting, and I'm sure that it's of great interest to the people of Plymouth. And if that's the kind of thing that you're really aiming at, maybe that's what you do.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think 100,000 people, at any one time, my gosh, that would be a huge study.
Well, that leads to another question I had, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you're doing a one-place study, are you really focusing on people in that place? Is that what the study is about, or is it?
It's up to you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's because of the size of the study. For me, I can do pretty much anything on any of mine. So I collect everything that goes under my nose and I whip it up before it passes me. But I think with the bigger studies, I think somebody I forget who it was talking about doing something about New York a little while back. Kim, I don't know if you remember that. I think that might have been when you were webmaster. I can't remember.
Yeah, and I don't remember that, but I know that one person is doing a county I know of because I grew up in Maryland and it's in North Carolina. It's actually quite near. And she's doing a whole county, and I'm sorry, her name escapes me at the moment, but Carrie, that we could get you that that name.
Yeah.
The fellow who's doing, Wesley Johnson's doing he was doing a part of Chicago, and that he did a really interesting thing, if my memory is okay, which it isn't.
Which it usually is.
Yeah. He studied the Czech community and picked a particular ethnic community. And I think it may have been that one, or it may have been another one he did, because I think he's got 3 studies. He decided to focus on one cemetery.
Yeah, that's in Canada.
And he followed the lives of people in one cemetery. I think I've seen another one
That's great.
Somebody followed the lives of midwives. Okay, so they chose an occupation. Obviously, we have a number of people who've chosen, say, a street within a town or a city to focus on, perhaps the commercial district or something like that. So you just have so many options, you know.
Yeah.
And it really is kind of, if you want to spend your time, and one of the big things you want to do, I don't know where you've moved from, but maybe you want to use this to help get involved in the community. You know, you might talk with the local historical group or family history group and see, you know, where the interests lie. Maybe you guys can make a collective decision on it. I know I've seen one, they're doing a really neat thing, and again, I don't remember where they have put up a virtual museum of their place, and they basically collected up various artifacts, or what, Kirsty, you'd call the 3D kind of, and they're doing that, and you can get a lot by looking at the town's a town's historical society or family history society. Look at their website and see what they're focused on. But I would think for a larger study, that would be more relevant than some of the things that we do at the record level and person level.
Okay, great. Now those are all great ideas. Thank you.
I think the point that Kim's made there, Carrie, is that, you know, there isn't a one kind of, not a one size fits all in terms of, there isn't a you have to do it this way. You know, the society is here to kind of support, guide, help, you know, share good practice, etc., give ideas, but it certainly isn't here to say, you know, well, everybody in the society that does a one-place study must do it this way, because it's like everything, you know, every person's family history is different, every person's studies will be different, their interests will be different. The size of the study is crucial, as we've already highlighted, but, you know, you might find that there are particular famous people, as Kim's alluded to, that, you know, might be really interesting to find out, you know, the impact they had on the community. What did they do? Did they change specific things? You know, did they not?
Yeah.
You know, what impact did they have? And, you know, I don't know anything about that, and it'd be really interesting to compare that, because I know that there were some interesting people that came from my two little places in Devon, but they wouldn't be people that were perhaps famous on a worldwide or even Devon scale.
Right.
But, you know, they did really good things in their own community, and I tend to focus on the people and also the buildings in those places. But there's some amazing stories. I mean, the newspapers, I didn't really say too much about newspaper articles and so on, but you might find for yours, Carrie, that, you know, there may be fascinating newspaper archives for, you know, your particular area of interest. We got in Luffingcott a haunted rectory. Or we did. I should say we did, past tense, because it's actually burnt down. Back in the early 1900s, and I bought a postcard, which, as Kim was saying in our 3D thing the other day, it's a very rare postcard, but there's the rectory. Back in the early 1900s, there are very few pictures, and it's not there anymore because it burnt down, and there was a rumour that it was haunted, and the rector, you know, the last one ran from the property saying he was never going back. And there's amazing newspaper articles about that, and it's those kind of stories for me that are what I want to do with my place studies. But that could be different. I know Kim's done lots of work on your in-depth study. You've done quite a lot of statistics. Put my teeth back in. Statistics, easy for me to say, on the surnames of people that have gone in and out of your places.
Yeah, I have kind of a different. I think what we all have in common is we all have to think out what it is what we're trying to do, what it is we're interested in. When I started my one-place study, I had taken a course, and they started talking a bit about one-place studies, and one of the assignments was to sit down and think about what a one-place study might do for you, and I got to making the list, and I think before I finished the assignment, I knew I was in deep trouble and I was going to have to do it. It was a real, I really had to think hard because I was still working full-time, and I still had kids at home. I still have kids at home. But one just left, by the way. And I had two one-name studies, which have really languished, I must admit, since I started this I think it was right at the beginning of 2013.
Mm.
But I had studied a name, Eastlake, and found they originated in a little place in Devon, and remarkably and coincidentally, only 10 miles from Kirsty's little places in Devon, but in Bratton Clovelly. And I knew the surname originated there, and I didn't figure that out. Somebody figured that out well before me. And but my family left there in the 1500s, and as you can probably figure out, went on over to the States in about the 1600s. So I thought, well, how am I going to, there weren't a lot of records on Eastlakes in medieval times. And I thought, well, how am I going to find out more about the origins of my family? And this one-place study was really, I thought, well, let me go learn about the place. And then as I got into it a little bit, I said, boy, I don't want to just learn about medieval times. I want to learn about all time. And for Bratton Clovelly, that is like really all time, because this place just goes on forever. In fact, it goes back so far that in the early 90s, they built a big reservoir, the biggest reservoir in the Southwest, right next to my parish. And the precursors to the time team, it was called Time Science at the time, and they eventually became Time Team in 1994. But they actually did an archaeological dig in about 1990 before this reservoir went in. And it turns out there's been people living in that area since about 4,000 or 5,000 BC. So when I talk about, for all time,
that's a long time.
Yeah. But anyway, and so what I did with mine was I thought, okay, I've decided to do it through all time, right up to, I think before living people, I think was kind of the only constraint I put on it. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And as Kirsty said, I like statistics, and I just love data, and I like to analyze. My husband does all the social part of history. I kind of just sit at my computer pretty much. But so I thought, well, I'm going to start transcribing, and I spent the first year and a half furiously transcribing everything I could get my hands on, especially the censuses and the I finally went into the parish registers which go back to 1555, and now do more things like school records and some of the more local sources, and have really enjoyed that immensely. But now I'm kind of, because of the migration work, I got to really starting to analyze all this vast amounts of data I collected, and now my focus is really on seeing what I can get out of the data. So there's a lot more data to collect, but right now I'm quite interested in actually analyzing it and seeing what I can tell about this community and how the people lived and what life was like for them and where they went to and everything, and I'm just loving it. And I think my place is admittedly, I really kind of needed to retire, which I did at Christmas, but I really love the size of my place, which is, it peaked in the early 1800s, as did many places, with about 870 people or so. But probably through most of time, it was 400 or 500 people. And I'm finding it just a brilliant size for if you want to go in at the individual level and collect up all the records about the place and all that kind of stuff.
I think you're really lucky, Kim, because I'm always very jealous of all the analysis you managed to do, because I don't have the records as far back as you do for your parish, even though, as you mentioned, it's, well, if you're a good stone thrower, it's a stone's throw away from your parish, but mine certainly, they did not keep good records. In fact, one of my the marriage register for Tetcott is completely obliterated because they left it in a non-damp proof cabinet So there are no marriages. Well, there were, but there's no marriage register original one to actually consult even. So if I wanted to do a complete analysis just of marriages, I'd have to spend £9.25 for every single one that I thought might have happened in TechGot, which is quite expensive.
And
so,
I feel really lucky. I mean, what's the chances of, living in the States, a family being in the States for 250 years, and I end up an hour away from where the family originated? I mean, what's the chance? And mine, like the parish registers, you can almost hardly tell that there was a civil war in England. I mean, it just keeps going. This little place has just gone on and escaped the ringes of time.
It's brilliant, and I think it's lucky because, I mean, what Carrie was saying about being in the place where she wants to do the study. I'm not massively distant from Devon, but it's far enough that it's a bit of a drive, and you have to go down for a couple of days to make it worthwhile. I mean, Susie, you're very close to yours, and I know, Ros, you live not a billion miles away from yours either. Steve, where's your study?
New Fishbourne down near Chichester on the south coast.
So it's not massively miles away from you, is it?
An hour's drive.
Yeah.
By train. Yeah.
So what's your main focus? Because I'm imagining Fishbourne as a child and going to a Roman something or another.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of ignored the early settlers.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you gone all the way back that far?
No, I'm afraid not.
No, leave the Roman villas for somebody else.
Yeah, my focus is the kind of Victorian period, the census. Like you, I grabbed things about Fishbourne, so I've got a lot of newspaper articles that I've transcribed and still more to do. At the moment, I'm doing some family sort of gathering records for people, and I'll just sort of kind of way of putting it on the website, so it just shows the sort of families together. And the sum total of that, I know there's 2 families, but I'm working on that. So going back to this business about sizes and that, because New Fishbourne is the place. There's also Old Fishbourne, but Old Fishbourne is part of the next parish, usually. But later on it became part of Fishbourne, and then it got a whole lot of Chichester as well. So like 300 people in 1880 and about 900 people by 1900. So there wasn't a lot of big movement of people. It's just because the boundaries changed, and so my problem is going to be identifying who. Who? It says Fishbourne. Which one is it?
Yeah.
There's also a couple of other ones. There's one other white.
Yeah. I don't quite have the which Fishbourne is it, but I have the how do you spell Techcot and Luffencott? The age-old problem that all family and local historians have, that actually we might spell certain words in certain ways, but whether the document says that or the transcription says that is quite another thing.
I've got that problem with Grant and Clavelli.
Oh yes.
I didn't pick up many census strays. There's so many spellings.
I have a slightly different problem, because if you try Googling for Debenham, that's what you get.
Oh no! Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah.
Oh, I've got an Admiral Fishbourne who wrote a lot about military, sort of like that, mostly about naval warfare actually, and ships and missiles and things. So,
yeah.
I thought there was somebody with the same name. So.
Yeah, I have an HMS Techcot, which ship named HMS. Well, I've got a book about it because I just kind of thought, well, it's got to be connected in some way. So I thought, well, grab the book, and it doesn't really tell me much about Techcot as a parish or anything, but builds up a bigger picture.
So, Steve, did you decide to focus on a particular time frame, or?
Well, at the moment it's more been driven by the availability of work and so on, but I have really concentrated around the kind of the census period. So I pinched somebody else's idea. I had a conversation with one of our members. I've forgotten her name, but she'd drawn together a timeline for people, a family timeline on a PDF, and I sort of copied the idea but changed the presentation, so it's actually a web page. But she's got sort of pre-1841, 1841. 1841 to 51, and then 51, and then the gaps in between. And I'm sort of working on that at the moment. But I have got things from later on, but I have really, because of the records are more easily available, and I have sort of concentrated on the sort of the 19th century.
I am focused on the 19th century right now for migration because I'm trying to find where people went to and came from, and the censuses and the online records worldwide just are really critical for that. But when I started my study, I said, well, I want to do Bratton Clovelly for all time. And what I decided to do was, although I did pick up the censuses quickly and picked up the parish registers, I said, let me just find some records from each century. And so what I've tried to do is sample. So I went and got the hearth tax from the 1600s, and I found a muster roll from the late 1500s, and a freeholder list from the 1700s, and I've tried. And then I also, at the same time, back in 2013, when I was richer than now that I've retired, I decided I was going to get the manor rolls translated. Fortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, there's only like 10 of them, and I'm pleased to say that I think I'm within just a few weeks, well, of the fellow, my translator, not me, having all those translated, and it's taken, you know, over a couple years, so I can afford it, and so he has time to do it. But I've tried to sample from all the centuries just to get a feel, and it leaves a lot of the smaller sources still waiting, but at least I've got getting a feel throughout time for the place.
Good point, actually. But yeah, so I think when I've exhausted my 19th century, or at least got to the stage where I understand I should go further back. I'm not so sure what coming further forward, mainly because the numbers increase a great deal. You know, this late 1800s where they gained a whole part of Chichester and also part of Bosham. The number of people trebled.
What choices did you make, Roz? What have you what kind of tack have you taken?
Well, at the moment, I'm just transcribing the really early parish registers, you know, the sort of 1665 type era. And I'm going to transcribe the censuses a bit later. The furthest back that I've gone is I found the entry for my place in the Domesday Book.
Right.
And I found a translation of it because it's so difficult to see. And then I found an English translation of the English, if you see what I mean, because I couldn't understand that. So I put that up on the website and thought, right, see, I span all these eras, I do.
It's interesting, Roz. I went and spent a long time transcribing the parish registers, and some of them back in the 15 and 1600s. That was some pretty tough transcribing.
Mm-hmm.
They came online, you know, about a year after I finished transcribing them. They were available online through Find My Past, and I thought, oh, should I have done that? But I think I got such an acquaintance and a feel for the family people. I actually, and plus I picked up everything in the record, not just the index. But I think it was time well spent, and I use my transcripts all the time now for analysis.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think you do get you feel closer to the people. And you follow them through the registers, getting married and having children, and then dying, and the children getting married, and it's lovely. I think it's much better than any sort of TV soap that you might watch.
And there's a fair few not so good ones of those, in all honesty.
Yeah, and they're also depressing, but at least with this one, you know, you get to see all these people being married and having babies, and it's lovely.
Yeah, I'm very lucky with TechCop because, well, unlucky with the marriage registers, but lucky with the with the burials, because I've got a brilliant parish clerk who writes down the most amazing stuff. Normally in the burials you just have a name, hopefully an age, an abode, and the burial date. But my parish clerk obviously decided that more information was required. Yes! So we have all sorts of things before 1837 and after, but all sorts of annotations of, you know, was the rector of this parish for 35 years, or played the organ in the church, or all sorts of random stuff. But it's just brilliant. And as I say, pre 1837, when some of the reasons for their burial, you know, the reasons for their death were recorded. Well, I'd never have known that otherwise, because, you know, the afterwards bits you can get the death certificate and so on, but before 1837, without that, I would have been clueless. And some of them are just amazing, you know, the drowned in the lake, or
Yeah.
but at least then you're directed to the fact that maybe you might want to look at the newspaper for that period, so you can find out what happened to the child that drowned in the lake, and maybe there's a story behind that child that drowned in the lake. Maybe it fell in or whatever. But it's just fantastic, and you know, that's a real plus point, as you say, Ros, when you're looking through and sort of going, well, here's the family, and then what happens to each one of them as you go through, even when they're nothing to do with you sometimes. In fact, most of the time they're nothing to do with you, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I found a wonderful one where a young man was unfortunately killed, and against his burial entry, it says that he'd gone to show some strangers around the silk mill, and set the machinery going, and fallen into the machinery,
Oh no.
which was set a going impiously on the Lord's Day.
Oh no.
And I thought, yeah, I can just see that the rector really liked writing that one in. And that was the whole reason for him being killed. It was because it was on the Lord's Day that he'd done wrong.
And he should never have done it. What a naughty man.
Oh dear.
Oh, brilliant. But it's just those little pockets, isn't it, that just build up the characters.
Yeah.
So when you are starting from scratch, you know nothing about that parish, perhaps, or very small amount, and suddenly you've got this amazing picture. And particularly if you've got, I've got a whole section, as I'm sure most parishes do, where you've got lots of children that die of measles, or lots of people that die of the same illness, that you can see obviously wiped out several members of the or several members of a family, or several members of the community, all in one block. And it's like, Kim, you were referring to using the school records for your parish, and I find them absolutely fascinating. I've got people that the reasons for them not going to school I always find brilliant. You know, somebody was helping out at home, or, you know, helping on the farm or something, and I have someone who had a liking for wildlife that meant they weren't going to school. I don't know quite what that meant. I don't like to read too much into it, but obviously meant they'd rather be outside than in.
I'm going to index that school logbook. I've got a history of the disease in the parish. I've got a history of the rise of central government. I've got of weather, everything. But hey, I just want to mention, I see Wesley's here, and I used his name in vain a little earlier.
You did. I don't know if he's got a microphone. No, he's muted at the moment, but
yeah,
I don't know if he's there.
I don't know if he can hear. But,
No. Because I often have to, well, I hope he can hear us, even if he might not be able to speak back to us and answer. But oh no, he didn't. He said he's just written on the side there. I didn't hear the earlier mention. It was about your Chicago study and your cemetery study we were talking about earlier on. And when I was over in Toronto, it was one of the few that we have in that particular area of Canada. So I was extolling the virtues of how diverse our studies are with your cemetery in Ontario, Wesley, which is just brilliant. I think it's really interesting the way that he sort of decided to study the people that are actually buried in the cemetery and how they came to be there, and so on and so forth. It'd be great to hear a little bit more about that. I don't know if he's able to talk back to us, but it would be brilliant to hear from him if he is.
We've got some others in the room too.
We have indeed. Cindy said she's having problems with her sound, so I don't know if Cindy can actually speak to us or not, but maybe not.
And there's someone next to Cindy too, and I don't know.
Well, that's you on mine, Kim, so.
Recognize everybody's faces.
There's Lois, what are you up to?
Is my mic working?
It's beautifully working. We can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Great that you're able to join us. I don't think you've done a Hangout with us before, have you?
No, I haven't. I just got an email saying that it was on, so I clicked in.
Brilliant. Perfect. That was an ingenious, inspired idea, Susie. Well done for that. So where's your study, Lois? And I can hear the accent. Obviously, you're not a UK-based person.
No, I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada.
Oh, okay. And where's your study?
Well, I haven't actually started it yet. I want to do Mushaboom in Nova Scotia or Muddy Creek in Prince Edward Island.
Oh, okay. There might be some Siliphants in Prince Edward Island. That's my surname that I do a study on, but they came over to Prince Edward Island, so you might have come across some of those. So tell us about the two places in terms of, how are you weighing up which one you're going to choose?
Well, Mushaboom is where my bootlier connections come from.
Right.
Pretty much the whole community is bootlier. And
is that the surname, Bootlier?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And in Muddy Creek is where my father came from, and it's mostly all Poiriers and Gadettes, all Acadian.
Okay. And in terms of size, we were talking, I think, just before you joined us about the different sizes of studies, and in terms of the number of people that live in those places, are they quite big or are they small villages, hamlets?
They're both small.
Oh, okay. So you're not in a position like Carrie is, where she's looking at Austin and trying to scale down which bit she's going to do.
No.
Lois, are you in touch with a woman named Tessa Keogh?
I'm familiar with her, but I've never been in touch with her before.
She is studying a place in Newfoundland.
Newfoundland, yes.
Newfoundland.
Go and get the accent right, Kim.
Yeah. This is the problem. This is what's rubbed off on England. I came over and called this place Devonshire, my first 5 years, and now I'm kind of at Devonshire, and then just thought, well, Devon's probably the best option. But anyway, Lois, Tessa's been studying. I can't remember the exact name
Lake
now.
Cove East.
Yes. And I think that you probably could have some really interesting chats with her on kind of how she's done about it and where she's found records. And she's done a lot of work on it. She's visited the place. You have the great advantage of being up there. And I think she had to come from like California or something. So. But anyway, I really encourage you to get in touch with her. She'd just be at tessa.keogh@oneplacestudies.org.
Right.
O-U-H, yeah.
Well, thank you.
It's interesting to have some more Canadian studies. We don't have too many in Canada at the moment. I think we have about 5 or 6. Steve, you're the expert on those. Yeah, he's nodding. Yeah, it's go ahead.
I'll be spending a lot more time on Canada, I think, as a result of my work on migration from Bratton Clovelly.
Okay.
You and I have found with our migrants in the Victorian period, especially the earlier Victorian period, that a great number of them went to Ontario. And Lois, there's a woman over in Ontario named Cher Latouche, who's actually written several books on Devon migrants to Ontario, and so we're really exploring that. It was, I think, it was prompted a lot by a local religious movement called Bible Christianity, and Janet and I have both found lots of, perhaps, I don't know, 70–80% of our migrants going to Ontario when most people were going to like the States and stuff. So I'll be wanting to become a lot more acquainted with how to do more research over there.
So certainly my Silifant emigration was religion based as well. They weren't from my place that I'm studying, but they definitely went over for religious reasons. I'm not sure if they were Bible Christian. I think they may have been Wesleyan Methodist from the top of my head, but similar, similar but different. I'm sure they'd say it was very different.
Since I think it was about 1865 when all those groups merged back into a United Methodist group. And
mine was in the 1830s. The main migration. So, but yeah, as I say, I'm pretty sure they were Wesleyan Methodist. But as I say, similar but different.
Right.
Okay, well, we've just got a couple more minutes, really. If anybody else has got some ideas or questions that they'd like to add into the mix, thinking about starting from scratch. It sounds like several people in the room today are thinking about starting, but haven't actually taken the plunge yet. So if either of you have got any questions, or if anyone's got some hints and tips and things that people shouldn't fall into the traps of, then we've got just a couple more minutes to share those. Steve?
Yeah, I get there, sorry. Go back to Carrie's question earlier on. One of our members is doing a study on Manchester. She's doing a single street.
Oh, okay.
And I've not had much conversation with her about it, but I think she's kind of using the census as a starting point and working out from there. I can't remember what the name of the street is. It's Stone Street or something like that in Manchester, but that's sort of almost, eating the elephant maybe one bite at a time, or eating the elephant at just one bite,
Yes.
So maybe from Carrie's point of view, maybe she could pick a particular part that is distinct or is easy to identify in the records, or using the same basis.
You've got so many options, Carrie. What I'm sitting here thinking about is Austin's history. And there's so many newcomers to Austin, and all the students pour in, but it's grown so much, and I'm thinking there must be a ton of people in that town that would be really interested in history and knowing what I do about San Antonio, which for others that's I was living only about 45 minutes or so from Austin. Yeah. But with the Alamo down there and everything, I just think, you want to go see what, I'm sure that there's people there who've done a lot of work on the history of the place and kind of coming out of the Wild West and what it meant to have the government settle there and what it meant to have the university settle there and everything. And it might be something that you say, hey, okay, maybe you focus on kind of the physical history of this place and let's start bringing the people element into it or something, because that's what we like to do, is kind of combine the people and the place stuff.
And the place.
Yeah. You've got just a world of opportunity. Yours is going to be much more a matter of making hard choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you realise that, don't you, Carrie?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Yeah, so it certainly has different issues to my Porcupine, for sure.
Well, you've given me a lot of great ideas and places to think about focusing. I just have one question before we end about kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So, what is the easiest or best way that you all have found to then present it? We didn't really talk about that yet. I was just kind of looking around on the website as you were talking and seeing some of the things other people have done. Do you like a blog, like a Wikipedia type of website? Like, what have people found that works the best?
Well, I use a website. I don't really do blogging.
Okay.
So I've got a website for Debenham family history, and it's sort of grown a bit now, so it includes my other little parishes of Aspel and Winston and Kenton and places like that. So it's getting a bit cumbersome now, and I'm thinking that I need to separate them out into their own individual websites. But that's going to make it a bit complicated, I think, because I've got the family reconstruction, which is all in one database, and where somebody's born in one place, they'd be married in another. I couldn't split those across separate websites.
I've got a website too Carrie, and I'm really think that the thing that works for me. But I would say that I wrote about five blogs and then started a diploma course in local history about a year and a half ago. And I finished it 2 months ago, and I still haven't gotten back to my blog or my website. And some of the things I'm doing right now, I've got some presentations scheduled, which I'm excited about. One for this AGM, but also for the Guild of One Name Studies, a couple groups, Devon Family History Society, and I think I'm excited about that, and I want to write some articles.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of options, and I think with what you're doing, you need to take a look at. I'm sure you've got people in the town who already have websites and probably newsletters, maybe all manner of stuff. So I think you'll want to spend a bit of time just taking it, because I just have to believe with the university that has got to be just the heart of looking into the history of that place.
Yeah, yeah, they have a really great history. Couple actually really great history centers in Austin downtown. There's actually several. So yeah, I just need to spend some time just kind of seeing what's going on. But yeah, just wanted for general planning. What should I be looking at?
Again, I think it's there isn't one size fits all, but I think putting something online, from my perspective, is crucial, because that's where everybody looks nowadays. And if you want that kind of global reach, whatever you decide to do, whether it's a website or whether you put a blog or a blog and a website, it's just having something up there, and having something on the One Place Studies site, our society site, as a place, just as a kind of a place marker to start off with, to say what you're doing before you then decide what might link into it, would be a good place to begin, to sort of say, well, actually, I'm going to do, once you've decided what it is, you're going to do X, Y, or Z on Austin, and then you can put it up there, and then you can decide, once you've collected some of that data, information, pictures, whatever it may be, decide where you're going to put it after that.
Okay.
Now, I know that we're at 4 o'clock and we normally end on the hour, but I've just seen that Wesley's managed to get in. We can see him, and hopefully we might be able to hear him too. No, we can't hear you.
Are you?
Oh.
Wesley, earlier I was just talking about some of the really interesting choices you made to pick out particular groups within very large places, because Carrie's looking at Austin, and although much smaller than places like Cleveland. But the other thing that, as part of presenting, Wesley's actually written a book, so that's an option too.
Okay.
Yeah. just pop that into next week, Carrie.
Yeah, right. No problem.
I'd like to do someday when I move down to Malta, hopefully next year or the year after. What I'm hoping is I'll have collected up an awful lot of my local record sources while I'm still here in England, and then I can just write away for the rest of my life. I just be thrilled.
just write away in nice warm Malta.
That's right.
And do my statistics, Kirsty.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can collect it all first, and then take it with you to Malta and do something with it there. I think, Wesley, we'll have to do a technical run-through with you so that we know how it's going to work, maybe for next time. I think we've pretty much run out of time on today's. I'm amazed there are so many people who have joined us today at a different time that have never done Hangouts with us before. It's been brilliant. So I think maybe we might have a look at doing another one on a random occasion in the future. So thank you so much, everyone. Oh, Wesley's going for attempt number 2. Is he? No, it's still not working. It's still... Yeah, we'll have to do a technical run-through sometime, Wesley. Send me an email and we'll do a technical run-through to make sure it works for next time.
Stay on the line, Wesley, and we'll talk to you after I stop the broadcast.
That would be good, actually. Yeah, that would be good. All right, well, thanks ever so much, everybody. Thanks, Susie, for the tech, but also thank you, everyone, for sharing your own studies. I hope that people who are starting from scratch, or considering how on earth they might start from scratch, maybe I should say, I hope it's given you some ideas, and hopefully we can continue the conversations as well after today. So thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.